All right, let's move on to the next issue. Promises more robust stringification. This is a PR number 13784. It was opened by Timothy. So let's see who added this on here. Looks like Anna added it. Let's move on to the next issue. Promises more robust stringification. This is a PR number 13784.
Oh, sorry. I think that was feeding back through me. Checking the live stream. Didn't realize I was on.
All good. So the problem is that if a promise value or if an unhandled rejection cannot safely be stringified, it throws an error, I believe. Anyone want to lead this one up? From the pull request, it looks like the concern is that we're swallowing an error. And so there seems to be some mixed Rod, I know you said you were +1 on this. Do you have any comments on it?
Yeah, it's tricky, and so I'm actually inclined to take the advice of the people weighing in there who are promise advocates and users. But the core problems are that you having a catch that then throws in its toString will cause an error, an exception, and that exception is not catchable. So it happens outside of the current stack, and so there's nothing. So the proposal in there was to do some more sophisticated handling of toString instead of just doing a plain string. Actually doing a try catch around it and then doing something more sophisticated with the object. The current proposal was to simply say couldn't toString, or toString failed, or toString threw an exception. But there was some discussion in there about doing some object inspection on that case. To me, that seems like a bridge too far, because it's like, what are you doing throwing in a toString? Like, just don't do anything with toString. Leave it alone, please. So I'm happy with the current version of it. Ben's just joined; he's got an opinion on this, I know. So I'm happy with the current implementation, which is simple and doesn't swallow the error, but actually and doesn't put it in outside of the stack, but gives you some information. And it's our fault as well for inspecting this object in the first place. And if you look at Chrome, I suspect Firefox as well, that it doesn't inspect the object; it just shows the object, and then you can choose to inspect it after that and use the object browser. So Ben, this is the promise toString throwing issue number 13784.
So I'm not super happy as a generic thing about that PR. I'm not even, I'm -0, if we can call it. So I'm not. I don't think we should not print the error. Okay. Also, this is probably a case where we should do a little bit more thinking and reasoning. How can we be sure that an error? How can we be sure? How can we print something safely? So this problem of printing something safely has been brought up a lot of times already. And we don't have a generic utility to do this, okay? So my point in there is not showing the exception that has been thrown. It's not nice, okay? Even if toString is throwing an exception, then try to print that exception as well. And then if that's what that blows up already. Still, well, okay, give up. But saying just to string throw an exception and not printing that exception, I don't think it's a good approach. But that's my point of view.
Yeah, and that one of the responses to that was that it may not actually be a real exception. It could be any random object that's being thrown. But that's, I mean, but this is my point about there's a rabbit hole here that we could go down with a really sophisticated implementation. And my question is it worth it for this case? Because this is a very specific case, and I'm not aware of anything that's similar in our code base. Perhaps there is, and we can actually implement something that's cross-purpose. But this seems like really specific and a lot of work to make it.
Seems like it's very useful in the REPL.
It's
yeah, for in the REPL, you mean for printing out just arbitrary objects?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
So I've seen, I don't remember the issues, but I've seen this subject being moved along on being talked in a lot of times. Okay, I'm fine with the current implementation. I'm just, this seems a little bit simple. So because if you have that error, go debug that in production. That's my only problem. Because to string except failed an exception, you are left with more or less nothing. That's my only concern there. But again, it's as Rod said, it's actually something we can even iterate on and stuff like that if it's fine. So I'm not blocking this. I'm just saying I would prefer to be a more throughout implementation and maybe cross-purpose to some point.
But
Right. My motivation is
to catch that exception. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Michael.
I don't know what's the good in catching it, because the current state is that you have the stack trace and you see where it throws, so it's better than printing toString had an exception. I mean, I don't know. Is it the issue? Is it a real case or it's just theoretical? Just someone who tried in the REPL and saw that.
It does seem theoretical to me. It's like throwing something with a custom toString. Who does that?
Yeah, okay. That's why I'm saying I'm good, but this subject has been brought up other times. I'm not, it's also the fact that if we start doing this type of things, we already have a problem in there, in that specific part of the code base, that those exceptions do not crash the system. We already have a deprecation in place. So it will get, I just don't want to keep setting bad precedences on this, but that's my only concern.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, why would you do this when a better solution exists and it's not even that more complicated?
So is the proposal then to make some sort of util inspect exception thing, that is a generic exception printer that can take an arbitrary object and print it as an exception? Or what are we looking at here?
What I would suggest is that, so the problem here is that we're invoking toString, which may throw an exception if it's overridden by the user, is to provide a binding method that inspects the object and makes a stringified representation without invoking any user JavaScript code. I mean, V8 already has APIs for doing that, so yeah, it shouldn't be too hard.
Where else would we use that?
Well, for example, the REPL seems like a good place. Well, basically everywhere where we would otherwise inspect an object, but in ways that wouldn't be safe, wouldn't be exception safe, that's where you would apply that.
I would say that is probably a new features to be added, and it's probably a lot of work to do that. So maybe we can go back to GitHub, open an issue in which we discuss that feature if it's needed, and if there is some traction that it's needed, then go implement that and then use that feature in there. As a concept, this PR, I think probably we can move it forward with the intent that if that gets traction, we will use it in this one.
It did seem like some people actually objected to this implementation, though, would be my biggest concern at this point.
Ben was one of those, and I think he's just outlined why. And that sounds like a reasonable approach, but so I guess the question now is, do we move forward with this simplistic version with an ideal version down the track, or do we just leave it as it is because it's not really hurting anyone? It's just kind of messy if you do a custom toString and then do the ideal later on. So jump straight to the ideal and reject this interim step, or accept this as an interim step. I guess that seems like the logical path.
I think I disagree. Primarily because swallowing random exceptions leaves the program in an undefined state, which, well, it just seems bad for a debugger, for an inspector.
Okay, Matteo agrees. I agree with that as well. Should we punt this back to GitHub for now? And maybe Ben, you could make a comment. Have you ever commented that on the pull request?
Yep, I have. And if needed, I can make a proof of concept of a simplified stringification implementation.
I think that would probably be a good step at this point, since there does seem to be some disagreement on how to handle things. And that way we have two implementations that can be viewed and go from there.
Yeah, well, there's no call for a vote or anything on this, so I think that's fine, Ben. If you still, well, Ben and others, I think, if still have objections, this is not going to move forward. So go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'll try to do that this week.
Raphael is just commenting on similar issues come before. Issue number 12956. Is use user object call or apply. I'm going to drop a link in the chat there, but that's probably something we can look back to in that as that develops.
Thanks, Rob. All right, I guess we can move on unless anybody else has anything on that. Next, we have an issue opened by Matteo. Dropped the nappy modules flag earlier than dropping the experimental status. Matteo, do you want to take that one?
These emerged. I just reported something from the that was discussed briefly on the VM Summit in San Francisco at Node.js and Node Summit in July. So I'm just reporting what was discussed in there. there is a problem on an API to start gathering adoption and feedback, so people can try it out and see what to do, how that works, because there is a missing feedback link at this point. So one of the options that was discussed was dropping the moving it from outside the flag to some extent, and so that people can see still the experimental flag, the experimental warning, but they won't use the they could use this straight away. Okay, so probably it's probably a middle ground for them as well. This is probably need to be ironed out a little bit more. But this is something that will definitely help in getting enough feedbacks for the team. Because yeah, that's it.
Is there a link to the notes that were taken at the VM Summit? I know it was done in a Google Doc, but there was a lot of discussion about this. A lot of keenness, I think, on behalf of most members there to get this happening, just because there was a barrier to adoption. But I see Jeremiah has raised an objection to this, so we need maybe more of that context, which is why I'm wondering if the minutes helps at all.
I think this should be it. This should be the notes from the VM Summit meeting. But I don't see any discussion about that in here. So I don't know. I remember we spent a lot of time talking about it.
I wonder whether, I think somebody needs to get in there and make the case for it, because I know that case was enunciated at the meeting. So yeah, that probably needs to be done by somebody who has that in their head. But that might be Michael Dawson, even, or one of the Microsoft folks.
Yeah, let's defer it to GitHub, and I'll flag an issue. I will comment that issue and closing, and I will flag this issue and says if Michael could make a better case for it, because it's there is this Jeremiah conflicting.
That's good to me.
All right. Did anybody have any other issues to bring up today? All right. If not, I guess we could move into the QA section.
At the moment, I've asked for comments on the stream, but if you're listening to this, you can also comment on, I think, somebody in IRC.
I just asked an IRC. Let's see, we don't have upcoming meetings. For upcoming meetings, you can look at the Foundation calendar at nodejs.org/calendar.
Nothing in the stream. No questions in YouTube or comments.
Wait another minute or two, I guess, and then we can move on. All right. I guess that wraps things up. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Okay, stopping.